Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. I know it's Saturday, but I figured I'd do a video this morning. I woke up early, so figured I'd give a little presentation on mass media and media bias. Put together this PowerPoint and trying this voiceover. It's the first time I've ever done this, so if it messes up, I'm sorry. So we're going to talk about media bias and how the media presents things in a way that benefits their audience or sells to their audience. For the most part, if you look at NBC, CNN, CBS, they're going to fall to the left or the Democratic side, while Fox News is going to fall to the right or the Republican side. So we're going to go through the different kinds of media bias to better understand what they're presenting us and how it affects us as a public. So here's your quote: "The wisdom of the crowd often replicates the opinions of experts. Do you agree or disagree?" If you need a second, pause the video, think about it. My way of presenting this is oftentimes your information about civics comes directly from me, so your opinion is going to replicate some of what I give you. I always ask you to come up with and formulate your own ideas, but sometimes you use my ideas, which is fine. So take a second, think about it. Our Florida Standard, analyze media and political communications, bias, symbolism, propaganda. We're strictly focusing on the bias at this point. I want you to be able to identify the bias and evaluate the bias and how it affects and impacts public opinion. The definition of mass media is any communication that reaches large, widely dispersed audiences. Now, newspapers aren't very popular anymore. However, we do use the internet and television to get our media for the most part. Media also includes social media. We do formulate opinions from the influence of Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all those things. Media is also referred to as molders and mirrors. If you strictly turn on MSNBC, your molding of opinion is going to fall more to the Democratic side. That their bias falls towards liberalism. If you watch Fox News, same thing. So if you're a Hannity fan, you're more than likely going to have a conservative viewpoint. If you watch Rachel Maddow on CNN, you're more than likely going to have a Democratic viewpoint. This is not only to sell to their audience, but to also mold opinion of the public. Here's some questions you can ask the media or ask yourself when you're analyzing the media. Who are the sources? If you're watching MSNBC, you need to understand that the sources from what you're getting are primarily going to support that Democratic side. They're big fans of President Obama, our Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, while if you watch Fox News, the source is going to primarily support President Trump. There's 5 components of bias. There's spin, labeling, placement, story selection, and selection of sources. We'll go through all these. I'll give you a quick overview. If at any point you think you need to stop and read what I've got presented, pause the video, read it. I'm going to try to push through this because I know y'all's attention span is pretty short right now, being off, so I'm going to try to go give you as much information as I possibly can in a short time span without going through a 45-minute lecture. Spin. Spin's one of the primary sources of your bias. You could think of spin as taking one story and presenting it 2 different ways. So let's use teachers versus students. So let's say a student was walking through the hallway or walking swiftly through the hallway and hit a puddle of water and fell. Well, it would be reported on the teacher side, student running through the hallway falls down. Well, that's obviously going to benefit the teachers. However, if you want to put it in the student's point of view, student was trying to get to class and fell in a puddle of water that spilled from Mr. Wells' cup. Well, that's obviously going to be in the student's favor and be more against the teacher. So that's just that spin. This is going to reflect whether liberalism or conservatism and how they take one story and separate. I got a quick little article research project for you to do after this. I'm going to give you a resource to go to check out. I'll give you more information here in just a little bit about that. So your media spectrum. Tone of coverage is how they're presenting something, whether it's negative or positive. So green is negative in this case, and blue is positive. President Obama ran in 2012 against Mitt Romney. Is that right? 2012. So if you were a fan of President Obama, you would definitely not want to turn on Fox News, because 46 of the stories they ran on President Obama were negative and 6 were positive. And this is over the coverage of August 27th to October 21st, so roughly 3.5 weeks. CNN did a good job staying right there in the middle, while MSNBC was definitely in favor of President Obama. Now, if you did not like Romney, you probably wanted to turn on MSNBC, because 71 of the stories they covered were negative about him. So I doubt a whole lot of people who primarily watch MSNBC voted for Romney in 2012. Labeling is just a way of giving a title to a person and trying to get the followers to believe them more. Well, you can call somebody an expert, you can tag them as liberal or conservative. In labeling, if I were to try to find an expert source and I work for MSNBC, well, I'm probably going to go to the Democratic National Convention and find a doctor there. Obviously, they're going to be in support of the liberal agenda. Same as if I was on the conservative side. If I wanted to find some expert opinion that reinforced my beliefs, I would go find an attorney or some prominent figure on the conservative side if I wanted to present to Fox News, and they use them to benefit my side of the story. There's always same story, different views. I always ask you to look at things more than one way. That's really what we're going to get into with this new research project. On the left-hand side, you have the Huffington Post, and Brookings Institution. Well, they were fans of President Obama, so they took one incident or one decision he made, and if you read it, it sounds very positive. President Obama manned up Wednesday. Okay, well, that's obviously going to be like, oh man, President Obama did a great job. That's how the Huffington Post reported it. Brookings Institute reported President Obama today will give a recess appointment to Richard Corday to serve as director of new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's pretty middle of the road, actually. It's not too bad. And on the right-hand side, you have Heritage Foundation. In a revelation that is quite shocking to anyone who knows anything about the 100 years of precedent. Well, you're already looking at a negative bias within that. They're obviously not going to present this situation in a positive reflection of President Obama. Once again, all of these have bias built into them. Placement. Placement is just when and where you present your story. On a newspaper, the most important story is going to fall to that front page, because that's what people are going to see first, and they're going to want to buy the paper. Same thing for the big stories when it comes to shows like 60 Minutes or any kind of news network that you watch. They'll usually put the big story about 20 to 30 minutes in. That way you watch some of the show and watch some of those commercials up into that big story. They know they can at least get you to hold on to there. But they're going to highlight it throughout the show, saying, hey, we're going to talk about this later, we're going to talk about this later. And it's the big story, it's that placement. Story selection. Story selection is picking what they cover and what they don't cover. Back in 2010, there was an incident called Benghazi, when it was a bad incident for President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the time. MSNBC only covered that for, I want to say, a total of 15 minutes. We had a bunch of Americans die that day. A country in Africa invaded one of our embassies over there. It just was a very negative incident. So MSNBC only covered it for about 15 minutes, while Fox News covered it for about 5 weeks. That's that story selection of, okay, we really want to give this negative information about these President Obama from Fox News, so here it is over and over again, while MSNBC didn't cover it, because there was no positive way to put it. Selection of sources, once again, that kind of goes back to your titles and labeling. If I find somebody who hates President Trump, then I'm not going to go get their opinion about a situation if I'm on the conservative side, or vice versa. Omission is leaving out facts on purpose. It's the same as lying. You can write a story without including some details that would hurt your agenda. A lot of media does this consistently. So the implications of bias, how does the media affect society? Take a second to think about that. Even your social media, a lot of y'all formulate opinions from others from social media. I always tell you to fact check before you formulate an opinion, but just think about that for a second, how it can kind of alter your thought process. How to recognize and analyze bias. These are questions you can ask yourself. Who are the sources? From whose point of view is the news reported? Are there double standards? Are there unchallenged assumptions, which means that they say something and they not give a counter argument to it? Is the language loaded or neutral? That's that excitement language is supposed to invoke an emotion from you. That's loaded language. So if I say, President Obama manned up today, well, that's loaded language. That's really in support of that liberal agenda. And it can be the other way, vice versa.